Welcome back to You in a Garage. We're back working on BYT here again, and what we're going to be doing this time is swapping in a later model Blazer tank. The Squarebody tank is 31 gallons, and the original tank is only 21. So we're going to be trying to take some longer trips soon, and we're going to need that extra fuel capacity. Also, since we did the LS swap, we've got an electric fuel pump. And because the original tank isn't set up for a fuel pump, we've been using one on the frame rail. Well, I've been burning those up lately. They get hot and they stop working. Just recently down in Moab, I was on an obstacle and the fuel pump burned up and was bad news. So the other advantage to switching to this tank is fuel pump is in the tank, so the fuel can keep it cool and last a lot longer. There's a couple things we're going to have to do to be able to get this tank into the Blazer. On the first gen trucks, the straps go side to side. On this tank, they go front to back. So we're going to have to fabric up some cross members to go in front of this tank so that we can get the straps hooked up correctly. Also, because this tank is so much bigger, this cross member right here is going to have to move back. And then the biggest modification to the tank itself, first gen Blazers, fuel on the driver's side. So this fuel hose, fuel nozzle, we've already taken it off there. We're going to have to move it over to the other side. But before we can figure out exactly where that's going to go, we need to drop this tank so that we can mock this up in place and see exactly where it's got to go so we can put our fuel nozzle on. All right, the first thing we're going to do to modify this tank to fit in BYT here is we're going to, as I mentioned before, we've already removed the fill spout, and now we're going to patch the hole. We've cut a disc. It's going to fit right in the hole here. And now we're going to take the torch and our brazing rod, and we're going to braze that in place and get that side sealed up before we move the nozzle over to this side. All right, now that we've got cap brazed on there, I'm going to use a little soapy water on it, and we're going to pressure test it and see how well we did. So we're going to pressurize it up to only about 5 psi, which should be good enough to find out if we're going to have any leaks. And we got one left. All right, we'll let that cool down and then we'll try again. All right, confession time. Look at the top of the tank here. That doesn't look like a nice circular little patch panel. Turns out I suck at brazing. Brazed on the circular plug that we made up and had a little leak. Tried to braze that closed. Another leak opened up, and on and on and on. It just kept happening. And finally I said, you know what? I may not be able to braze, but I can MIG weld just fine. So cut all that out, put a square patch panel on here, MIG'd around it, no leaks, pressure tested, good to go. So moving on, and yeah, no more brazing. So yeah, let's move on. As you can see, we have the tank removed and got a lot of room up here to get the other tank, but not quite enough. This cross member right here is going to have to come out and get moved back. All right, we've got the new tank pushed up in the position as far as we can get it. It's hitting these lines back here, and it's really close to the back of the truck here. So I'd like to get it a little farther forward than this. So let's take a look up here. All right, we're as far forward as we can get at the moment. This is the rear brake line here. This bracket is holding it up on this side. So I'm going to heat this bracket up and bend it back out of the way over here. That should give us several more inches on that. And then over on the driver's side here, we've got the exhaust in the way, but you can see there's lots of room right here to reroute the exhaust and give us some more room on the tank. So I'm going to pull the exhaust out. We'll get the tank mounted, and then we'll just rebuild the back half of the exhaust here. Now we've got some crappy old pipes here. We've got some mandrel bent stuff we can use to make better exhaust anyway. All right, we've got the exhaust pulled, so that's out of the way, and we'll remake that. And we've got the brake bracket bent up as far forward as we can go, but the tank isn't as far forward as I'd like still. You see right here that the tank is still pretty close to the back of the truck, and we're going to have a cross member here to attach the tank straps to, and there's still not quite enough room. So the tank still needs to move farther forward. If you look right here, that front lip on the tank is hitting the brake line. So I think I'm going to try trimming that tab off of the tank and see if we can get a little closer and see where we're at. Worst comes to worst, we may have to move that bracket completely, but I'm going to see if I can avoid that first. All right, we've got the gas tank trimmed up a bit. We got some room on that brake line. It looks like we can bend that brake line forward just a little bit, make even more room. But it looks like that's pretty much where we want it. All right, I've got the rear crossmember placed about where I want it. And so before we finalize everything, I've ratchet strapped the tank in place, and we're going to lower the truck down on and put weight on the wheels so we can see where the rear differential comes. We want to make sure that it can't hit the gas tank. So let's get some weight on this axle and see where everything's moving. All right, I'm pretty confident that where we have the fuel tank placed right now is where it needs to live. I don't think it's going to hit the rear diff. I don't think it can come up high enough with the bump stops. It's back far enough. So it's time to start finalizing the placement of our cross members. I'm going to pull the fuel tank out so that I'm not putting any pressure on this at all. And I need to mark where this cross member needs to go back together, weld it back together, and get it bolted in place so that we can move on to the next step. All right, we've pretty much got the rear cross member modified so that we can use it to mount our tank straps. You can see right here, we've got it welded all back together. Got the holes drilled for the straps. So that works for the rear, but we needed a cross member for the front. We didn't have one, so we had to make one. So let's check that out. All right, so as you can see, we've got the cross member bolted in, got our straps done. We have these pieces set at an angle so that the straps go in smoothly and nothing gets kinked. So we've got the tank hanging. Everything looks like it's gonna work as is. So we're going to do the finish welding on this cross member, and then our tank will be hung and we can move on to the rest. All right, while we wait for the paint to dry on the cross members we just made, it's time to finish modifying the tank. So as we discussed before, we need to move the fuel fill from the passenger side over to the driver's side. So while the tank was up in position, we marked a line on here so that we can see what angle this fuel nozzle needs to be on. So we got the angle right. So we'll cut a hole in there so we can get this on there. But the fuel fill hose is also smaller on these first gen trucks. This is only a 1 3/8 hose. So just got ourselves an adapter, just exhaust tube adapter. It worked just fine. So that'll fit into our fill hose. So we're going to modify this, weld this adapter on there so that we can hook it on. Then we'll get the hole cut and get this put on the tank in the right orientation. All right, we finished modifying the tank. We've got the lines all set up, got our cross members made up and in place. And so basically we can go ahead and install the tank as is. But there's one more modification I want to make. We've already discussed the advantages of having the fuel pump in the tank, lasts longer, the fuel cools it, blah, blah, blah. The one big disadvantage is if it does go, you have to drop the tank in order to get the fuel pump out and replaced. All right, when this fuel tank is installed in the truck, the floor is going to be right here, and everything we need to access is right here in the middle. There's just no way to access this while the tank is installed, unless we install a hatch in the floor. So we're going to be installing this in the floor, just like that, so we have access to this whenever we need to. All right, with the tank all hooked up, there's only one last thing to do, and that is we're going to have to modify the exhaust. As you can see right up here, the exhaust is actually touching the fuel tank. Obviously, that's no bueno. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut down the exhaust a little bit, and there's tons of room between the bump stop and the fuel tank here. So I want to try and get the exhaust to run basically right in the center here. All right, now that we've got our square body fuel tank all installed, we want to protect it. So what we're going to do is build a skid plate. Now, these came stock with a skid plate in the later Blazers, but it was pretty thin and not that useful. But it also attached to the stock cross members, which we don't have. So we're going to build our own, and we're going to try and make it a little heavy duty and hopefully protect this thing. So the first thing we did is we built some standoffs here, just tacked them in place. So we have something to attach our skid plate to and to give it some solid structure on the side. So to, hopefully absorb, the majority of the impacts. Now, what we want to do with these standoffs is have our plate come across and then wrap up around the side and bolt in from the side. That's why we've got the angle iron here. So we're going to have it bolted on from the sides, and then we're going to have it wrap up around the back, and we'll have it attached to the bumper that we're going to be making later. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a piece of sheet metal that we had laying around here. It's a circle, but luckily I think it's going to be big enough to do what we want to do with it, so we can cut it down into the shape we want. But we need to clean it up, so we're going to get some uric acid and get all the mill scale cleaned off so that we can have a clean piece to work with. All right, here's our cleaned up plate. As you can see, it looks fantastic. The muriatic acid really did the trick. So this is going to be a lot easier to work with, and it'll be it's already pre-cleaned up, so we can weld on it. Do be careful if you plan on using muriatic acid on concrete, especially. The plastic tray that I formed up, I ended up poking a hole in it in a couple of places, and so it leaked onto the concrete. It does at your concrete. You're not going to want that, so be careful. Anyway, this is 3/16, and most people recommend it to use at least a 1/4 inch plate for a skid plate on a rock crawler, but I just didn't want to add that much weight. So we're going to be cutting a bunch of holes in this, partially to save even more weight, but we do have the Swag Off-Road dimple die sets. So we're going to cut some holes and then we're going to dimple them, and that should add some strength back into this, make the panel a lot stiffer than it otherwise would be. So hopefully we can get away with this lighter plate. Now, the best way to cut the holes and do the dimpling is to use a drill press and 20-ton shop press. Unfortunately, some of these ones in the center were too far away from the edge for us to be able to use those things. So I ended up using my drill to cut these holes. The drill was not happy about that at all. So if you're going to be doing that, go slow. As far as dimpling the holes, luckily, the Swag Off-Road dimple dies have a hole in the middle, so you can use bolts to pull them together. So I went out and I got some, the biggest bolts that would fit through the Swag dimple dies, and that was 5/8. Put those through, greased the threads liberally, make sure everything was greased up nice and nothing would be binding, and everything went together like butter. We've got the holes all cut, got everything dimpled, and we're about ready to start fitting this thing up. The goal was to make this plate a lot stiffer, and wow, did it ever make it stiffer. I can bounce on this And I can feel how much stiffer that is. It's without those dimpled holes there, I'd easily be able to bow that plate. I'm really happy how that turned out. So let's get it fitted up. We got the plate all pushed up into position here. Make sure it's fitting the way we want. We've bent this piece back up to, you can see, hopefully you can see that. It is matching the angle of the back of the tank, maintaining our, 3/4 of an inch here. And when we build the bumper, this up here will attach to the bumper to give this angle some support. So we're going to leave this long for now so we can see exactly how that's all going to come together. For now, we just we marked this section here so that we can get those cut off, and then we'll get it welded together right here. Everything's looking pretty good. Initially, I was a little worried about the fact that we're making this out of a circle. And so you can see it's cut out across the front here. But if you look, that pretty much matches the angle of the tank. So it's actually working out pretty good. None of the tank is sticking out. Our supports we put up here earlier are longer than our plate, so we're going to cut those back. But yeah, I think it's turning out pretty good. So we'll pull it down again and start getting pieces welded together.
Well, here's the finished product. I really like the way it looks, and with the dimpled holes, it's going to be strong too. I can't wait to see how it holds up, but I think I'm going to be happy. I just love the way the skid plate looks in bare metal, so I painted it with a clear paint to protect it, but preserve the look. As always, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching You in a Garage.